week's episode of our show has been sponsored by Fables 2, Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse.
This second installment in the Fables franchise has you set sail into a magical ocean, taking up your pirate-themed campaign and going out on great adventures in this mystical, magical, almost space-like ocean.
We were super excited by the trailer, and you should definitely check it out in the links below, because Pirates of the Ethereal Sea is an amazing blend of high piracy and high magic.
I have tried to run several pirate-themed campaigns. I'm a big fan of them, and I gotta say the inspiration here is top-notch. I was really excited just watching the trailer and can't wait to see what's in store in these next upcoming chapters.
Each fable is broken into 6 chapters, and you get a new adventure every month to download. They come with everything that you need to run it, including digital maps and tokens and tools. So whether you're playing in person or online, it's a perfect way to have a new campaign to play every 6 months.
And this new Fables adventure is coming on July 1st, so it's not even that far away. So check the links below, watch the trailer. This is definitely one to keep your eyes on.
Thanks so much to Fables 2 and Ghostfire Games for sponsoring this episode. Things like this help us do what we do here on YouTube.
And now on to this week's episode.
Greetings! My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today we are continuing our series on tier ranking the classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We're taking this by party role, and this time around we're going to find out who is the best support class in D&D 5e.
Now, if you look on the screen right now, you're going to see the rankings that we used to determine which class we think is the best. Keep in mind that a lot of classes can fill a lot of different roles, so we're trying to look at the broad spectrum of what the class implies. If there's a specific build or specific subclass that breaks that mold, that doesn't necessarily guarantee a high ranking. We think that the highest rankings of S tier, such as the singular S tier that we will be granting, or the A tier, is dedicated to a class that overall fills that role absolutely, without question, basically no matter what build you choose. Whereas a B or C ranking implies more that there are options available to create a very strong presence in that role, but it's not what the class is designed to do. A D ranking means that there might be one specific option, or you're going to have to try really hard and choose very specific options to build yourself into that role, and that this class is probably not your greatest avenue to perform well in this role.
And as a reminder, we do these videos for fun discussion as a neat thought experiment, and maybe to help you pick out which character you want to play next. But you can never let our rankings dissuade you from playing the character that you want to play, or fulfilling that fantasy or vision that you have in your mind of your character. Today, we're specifically looking at the support role, which in many ways is the heart of every adventuring party. Many people think about healing when they hear the support role, and that is a very big part of it, no doubt about it. Healing is one of the quintessential ways that characters can support other characters in D&D 5e. And of course, that includes things like removing curses, reversing petrification, removing diseases, curing poisons, and, of course, putting your party members back together again with a well-timed Revivify, Raise Dead, or True Resurrection spell when they get vaporized by dragons or cut apart by orcs.
I do think that there are a lot of other avenues, though, that are very important to the support role. And the support role also encompasses bringing in skills, spells, and abilities that help out your party in performing what they need to do best. When your party's in trouble, do you have the tools to get them out of trouble and allow them to flourish at their roles? Is your frontliner able to continue being a frontliner? Your damage dealers able to continue being damage dealers? Are your smooth-talking negotiators making their charisma checks? Is your stealthy infiltrator able to get to where they need to be and scout ahead for the party? All of these are important, and really the support role is the glue that helps all other roles be better.
It's very important to draw the distinction between a support role and the utility role, because they can often be very easily confused. In our books, a support character is usually going to be bringing those things like give your party members +2 to their AC, or give them advantage on saving throws. Whereas a utility ability is actually going to give the party members things that they couldn't do before, like communicate telepathically, or breathe underwater, or turn invisible. So that's how we kind of draw the distinction. One of the things that also comes up in conversations around support are things like battlefield control, or even things that we would consider to be frontliners in that respect. We're going to draw those distinctions there as well. When you take a hit for another party member, that's not support, that's frontlining. When you trap the bad guy in a force cage, that's battlefield control utility, not support.
So with all that in mind, let's talk about the support role and look at each of the classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and discuss the ranking that we might give them in the support role. At the end of this video, we're going to take a look at what our audience thought of these roles and who they thought the best class was in the game for support. And there's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
So let's kick things off with the Artificer. I think that this is a great support class, but it's hindered by the fact that many Artificers are selfish with their infusions and abilities. Because this is the cool thing about the Artificer. You've got a decent spell list with some good support spells on it. You can usually bring things like Aid and Fairy Fire, and you often have things like Stroke of Genius as well, which can buff your party members' saving throws when you need it. But the biggest thing that often happens with Artificers is they get all these really cool infusions that boost their AC, that boost their attack rolls, that boost their defenses, that boost their capabilities, instead of giving those to their party members.
Well, I mean, my mentality is if you can't support yourself, how are you going to support somebody else? And with that being said, I'm a very selfish Artificer player. I like to use my infusions to make myself a monster tank on the battlefield or something else like that. But I will say that the avenue is very clear and very present for an Artificer to be able to divvy up their infusions to the other players, and they don't need to make any drastic choices or changes to the way that the class is presented. Every Artificer has an equal opportunity to buff all of their other party members to be incredible at what they do.
I just think it's something that we don't talk about enough, because it actually is pretty powerful. And I think the hard thing about it is that it really relies on you analyzing what your party members' capabilities are and having that foresight to be like, oh, you know what? If I used my infusions that increase the magic shield of the Paladin and increase their full plate, I could crank the Paladin's AC to the stratosphere, and it might be better for the Paladin, who's already on the front lines already, to have their AC that high instead of myself.
I think it's really interesting because, like, when I play an Artificer, I'm often trying to be the tank, trying to be the damage dealer. I really want to be on those front lines, doing what I think an Artificer can do. But it's just as viable to play an Artificer as just the mechanic. If you think of the party as a machine, the Artificer is the person who's making sure that that machine is running okay, that it is well-oiled and functioning properly. They have the insight to be able to manage all of the pieces, all of the gears and moving parts, and that's a support character.
I think the biggest things that hold them back, again, is the fact that they're not full casters, that they are half casters. And so the fact that they are half casters often it makes you think about your character not in terms of their ability to support others, but in terms of like, how can you cobble this together into the best thing that you can do for yourself? And definitely their subclasses oddly do pull them away from the support role in weird ways. They do pull them actually more towards being frontliners, particularly the armor and the battlesmith. And the support-oriented class, the alchemist, has this really random ability. I don't think we have seen a really strong support-oriented Artificer subclass emerge, and I think that that's why, for me, they're not top tier, but I think that they're absolutely an A. I think that it's kind of a dark figure, but I do think that there's a very strong case to be made that if you give your infusions to your party members and not yourself, it might be better.
I'm going to agree with the A ranking, but when I look at the whole spectrum of classes, I think I'm leaning more towards an A- with the Artificer.
Yeah.
Still an A, still top tier. An Artificer in your party is a great support character. There are better options, though.
The next class is the Barbarian. I don't have much to say here. This is not a support class.
The only support that they can give you is their muscles, but even that's utility. We talked about them a bit in utility and the fact that they can hold a door open for you or pull something or push or throw. That doesn't really even feel like support.
No, that's not. That's exploration. That, like, once in a while, you see a Barbarian feature where they get some sort of battle shout.
Yeah.
Where they're able to bolster their party. But even when they get those abilities, they are not really enough to build your character around, and they don't even come anywhere close. They're sprinkles. They are not the main dish.
The best a Barbarian can do in terms of support is maybe have one or possibly two abilities that they can use to bolster the party. In those cases, they're kind of just adding, a little nudge in the right direction. But if you had a Barbarian as your support character, you don't have a support character. So I think they're a D.
Yeah, this is a D. Moving on to the Bard, though. Here's where we get some amazing support features. First of all, we're a full caster, we're a charisma-based caster, and bards have an amazing spell list, and thanks to their magical secrets, they can pilfer the best of everybody else. If you want your bard to drop down some of those super rare paladin spells that normally paladins don't get till level 17, like Circle of Power and Destructive Wave, Circle of Power being obviously an amazing support spell that is very rare. You want to grab Aura of Vitality so that you can heal everybody up.
I think the Bard is one of the most incredible support characters in the game. They absolutely have a full package that you can design them to be the healer of the party if they need to be. But they also have access to some of the best support spells. On the fly, they can deal with situations that arise. And they usually have a tool in their back pocket to solve the problem. I will also say that Bardic Inspiration in itself is a support class feature, and it's one of the core features of the Bard.
In Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Bards also had Aid and Hero's Feast added to their spell list, making the Bard one of the best vehicles for the Aid, Hero's Feast, and Inspiring Leader combination of just bolstering your entire party's hit points way up there. Right? It's a great thing to be like, hey everybody, increase your hit point maximum by 30 and now have an extra 15 temporary hit points on top of that. It's great.
I will say, you and I decided at the beginning of this that we would only ever award one S tier ranking per role.
This is mine, for sure.
This is not mine.
Really?
Yes. And we'll get to mine later, but it's, I'm not disagreeing that if I was awarding two S tier rankings, the Bard would be my other S tier. I'm giving the Bard an A+++++, but
okay.
there are reasons.
Okay, one of the other things that I think is perhaps worth mentioning is when I think a lot of the Bard spells, I immediately also start going to, and they've got invisibility and polymorph and illusions and all of these other things.
That's utility.
You're right. You are dead on. Those are all utility things. And so I think one of the things that certainly I find myself muddled in that distinction. And so I think there is a strong argument to say, the Bard's amazing. The Bard excels in particular because they have this weird blend of utility and support that sometimes it's not clear which is which. Like, as a Bard, if you run in Bardic Inspiration somebody and grab them in Dimension Door out, was that support or was that utility? Well, you just did both in the same turn.
Well, I think that's the important thing about the Bards. I'm pretty sure that we gave them an A in utility. Yeah. And if I give them an A here, that is saying that the Bard, being a utility and a support character, they can carry the party as both of those roles at the same time. In
light of that, I'm going to give the Bard a provisional S because I do know what's coming.
Yes, and as we move on to the Cleric is going to be probably the poster child of support characters in D&D, and this is definitely where I'm throwing my S tier.
How many of you saw the title for this video and said Cleric?
Yeah, I'm not surprising anybody with this, but let me explain what makes the Cleric, first of all, amazing. Second of all, why I'm picking it over the Bard. First of all, same as the Bard, the Cleric has a toolkit to deal with situations as they happen on the battlefield. I have played a few clerics in my day, and each and every time what I've seen happen on the battlefield is that every sticky situation that any other party member finds themselves in, I was able to resolve that situation. It wasn't about utility in that sense. It was about the fact that if the fighter was unable to perform, I presented a situation where they could now perform. I was keeping people alive. I was keeping people up. I was keeping people free of diseases, illnesses, petrification. Even in a recent game that we were playing off screen, I used abilities and spells to just get rid of charmed effects.
Right.
And these are all really great support options. The Cleric is represented as the main healer in the games of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Party members are far more likely to go all out in their attack, which is good, with the Cleric backing them up.
I do think that when you know that you have a Cleric on your side, it does give you a level of confidence that few other classes instill in other adventurers. Especially if that Cleric is in a complete goody two-shoes. One of the things that you could say is that Bless is kind of an AoE bardic inspiration. It's just a d4, but you get to choose 3 targets. Clerics also have Aid and Hero's Feast and many other spells and abilities that can grant temporary hit points. They have the full toolkit of recovery features, from Dispel Magic to Healing Word to Revivify to Raise Dead to Greater Restoration to Heal. You name it, they got it, right? And so you're going to run into these situations frequently with a Cleric where even when your party members are debuffed, you can turn it around, right? If your party... I've seen Clerics over the course of a single turn have a party member who was nearly incapacitated and had disadvantage to everything, turn that around and be attacking with advantage.
Now, I do have one other note that I think pushes the Cleric above the Bard, and that is the Cleric's ability to pick and choose whatever spells they want.
This is very true.
Whenever they want.
Yeah.
So with a little bit of foresight, the Cleric becomes better than the Bard, because if the Cleric knows the situations that are coming, you can bet that they have multiple spells to alleviate the situation. If you know you're going to be dealing with poisons and dangerous diseases, you can pack the right spells to get rid of them. If you know that you're going up against a red dragon, you can pack spells to give your party resistance to fire damage or other things like that. So knowing the situations you're going to get into, unlike the Bard who has this smorgasbord of spells, but the ones that they've picked are there.
Yeah.
That's
very true.
The Cleric just gets to toss out their entire spell list and grab what's going to be essential, which makes them better support characters.
I think all of these things might even out between the Cleric and the Bard, but I think that there are 2 things in particular that push the Cleric over the edge. Twilight and Peace domains.
All right. I've played a Twilight Domain Cleric. The buff is incredible. The ability to keep your party not only alive, but just like it almost just keeps topping them up. It's just so good.
I gave the provisional S to the Bard, but you've convinced me, Kelly. I think it has to be the Cleric. Like, it just is so good.
Yeah. And not only, we talked about the Twilight, we talked about the Peace, but even before those existed, when we think of support, we kind of think of healing. And yes, it's a lot more than that, but really the Life Domain Cleric can just... their ability to keep the party
we didn't even
functioning.
talk about the Life Domain Cleric either. If your party's humming along just fine, you're going to drop Spiritual Weapon and Spirit Guardians and deal a boatload of damage.
Clerics are a really good class.
Yeah.
Now,
they are really good.
Now, as we move on to the Druid, this is another one that I do think is actually a great support class. I don't think that they're as good as the Bard or the Cleric, but Druids come packed with a boatload of healing options as well.
Yes.
So they can support the party. Now, the Druid kind of steps into that same territory that we talked about with the Bard, where they kind of are the bridge between utility and support.
Indeed, they are.
They are really good at both.
And they're also really good explorers.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that the Bard kind of also is a really good negotiator, obviously. And the Druid can be a really good explorer. And so that can kind of make the Druid support skills look better than they are in certain contexts. Like, if you are playing a very wilderness-based campaign, the Druid is going to be able to support your party through that wilderness environment in a way that maybe a Nature Domain Cleric probably could. but a bard would have to be very specialized in order to do that. But that said, when it comes to general circumstances, like a general combat scenario or a dungeon crawl, I think the druid kind of comes up a little bit short on the heels of the other two, because their spell list doesn't quite have... Their spell list has a lot of the things that the cleric does, but I feel like there's just a couple gaps there. Like, if you hold Fairy Fire and Bless beside each other, which one do you like better? And that might actually come down to which one between Fairy Fire and Bless do you like better. I like having both at the same time, and that's where it's great to have characters in your party that can cast both, so you can have both in play together. It's an amazing combo. But you really do have to ask yourself, like, what is the better party support spell?
You know, we did an entire campaign that had a bard and a druid in it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, we didn't have a cleric, and I will say that the combination of having a bard and a druid makes you not miss the cleric as much.
Yes.
And I think that that's an important note. I hear what you're saying. I still feel like in the same way that I gave the Artificer an A and the Bard an A. Now, the Artificer I gave an A-. I feel like the Druid kind of falls into that category for me. I'm going to give them an A. I'm going to give them probably an A-. I think that they're a strong contender, and if you had to rely on them for support, you'd be okay.
I think that they're a solid B for me. I think that if you do something like... Because, look at... A Moon Druid is not really going to be playing support to the same extent. But a Shepherd Druid might.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that B is where you see this choice of the Druid subclass really pull them up. And for me, that's what I'm going to stick to. I think that they're still really, really good, and in many circumstances will operate on a higher level. But then you'll get people who play the Moon Druid and really focus more on the utility, battlefield control, and frontliner attributes.
And this is the hard part again, as we are talking about support, and support and utility do have a blurry middle line.
Yes.
And the Druid kind of falls into that blurry middle in a lot of categories.
Yes, and that's actually a strength of the class. But it means that if you're looking for who is the absolute champion, it makes it harder for the Druid to kind of come out ahead. I think we can kind of lump the Fighter and the Monk together.
Neither of them are going to be support. I think both the Fighter and the Monk have limited utility capabilities that we talked about, but they don't buff the party. They don't solve situations that are occurring on the battlefield. They don't help the party be better. They're good at what they do, and they help the party be better by smacking things.
I think with the Monk and the Fighter, the way that we differentiate between support, utility, frontlining, and the other roles really throws into stark relief how what they do is not support.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, the Monk has utility as a skirmisher. The Fighter is an amazing damage dealer and is an amazing frontliner. There are going to be pockets of things, but there's nothing... You couldn't build a Fighter as a support character to the degree that you could build a Bard or a Druid or a Cleric.
No, and I think that's the important distinction, is a Fighter being a terrible support character does not mean that they don't help the party.
Yeah.
Every role helps the party. A support character is just kind of the glue character, and you never have a Fighter standing in the middle being like, I'm going to help this person, I'm going to help this person. They don't do that. They're on the front lines dishing damage, or on the back lines with a bow, but either way, they're killing things. That's the Fighter's job.
Exactly. And I mean, look, you could make a really, really narrow argument with a bunch of Battlemaster maneuvers or things that an Eldritch Knight can do. Like, if you knock somebody prone, that's kind of supporting your party members, but knocking somebody prone falls into this area of battlefield control, frontlining, like it's so many different things that making that an argument for support is pretty flimsy in my opinion.
No, if I'm a Fighter and I'm knocking somebody prone, yeah, I'm helping the people around me, but let's be honest, I'm doing it for me. If we want to talk about somebody who can perform in combat but is also well equipped for support, I think we need to talk about the Paladin. And the Paladin is kind of just a beautiful class that gives you a little bit of everything.
The Paladin answers the question, what if the Fighter did have support abilities? What would they look like? And they look like a Paladin. Paladins kind of get to steal some of the best things of the Cleric because they bring Channel Divinity abilities, they bring Bless, and they bring the amazing and incredible aura of protection and lay on hands.
They have built-in features for healing, support. They have a great spell list. Yes, you can definitely build a paladin to not worry about being the healer in the party. I know I have. You could build a paladin to not worry about support. I have built a paladin that was just there to deal incredible damage with smites. I barely use my spell slots for anything else. But it's not about the player, it's about what the class offers. And the class does offer you the opportunity to easily be a support character if you need to be.
The only thing I'll say, I think, with the Paladin is that if you're trying to be the dedicated support character, which I think you can do, especially with subclasses like the Oath of Redemption and the Oath of Devotion, and the Oath of the Ancients in particular, I do think that aside from your auras, you start to run out of gas pretty quickly. And you start to run into this place where basically what you do as a paladin, like for me, paladin support begins and ends with, did I cover all my party members in my aura? Did I cast Bless? Okay, time to smite. And then maybe I'll lay on hands if someone really needs it.
Their aura, though, is game-changing. Having
It
a
is.
paladin
It
in your
is.
party saves the party from so many terrible effects.
And it's just incidental. Like it's something that you always have, regardless of what subclass you've taken. And then you can get the really powerful ones, like the Oath of the Ancients or of Warding, or not.
So are they a low A or a high B?
They're borderline S.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. They're borderline S tier. Bless and Aura of Protection, just those two things, is a massive offensive and defensive swing for multiple party members. When you have the combination of a paladin that even has a modest charisma score, like a 16, now you have party members that are adding D4 plus 3 to their saving throws and their attack, and they're adding a D4 to their attack rolls. You have just, in one character with one action, just by the fact that you showed up as a paladin, regardless of whatever you did with your character. It doesn't matter if you were playing a gung-ho Oath of Vengeance Polar Master. You just brought Aura of Protection and Bless, and that alone makes a huge difference.
As we come to the Ranger, this is actually an interesting one because I think that the Ranger is an excellent class in a lot of categories, but almost it's starting to feel like, as I'm analyzing all of these roles, that the Ranger is sort of the master of none, jack of all trades, where the Ranger has a kit that is very useful for support. I wouldn't necessarily rely on them to be the support character of the team, but Rangers have Pass Without Trace.
Yep, and they also now have Aid on their spell list. They have some healing spells. They have some recovery spells. It's actually quite surprising, and they can bolster their party, but it's all coming from their spells, and they have a very limited number of spell slots.
And that's the thing with the Ranger is, do I think that they're a great secondary support option? If you have a Cleric and a Ranger, and your Cleric goes down, the Ranger can cover and get that Cleric up and help out in that way. Your Ranger is going to help your stealthy character. A Ranger and a Rogue who have to infiltrate together, you bring the Ranger along because he's going to bolster the Rogue and be able to perform in that. So they can tack on with any of the other roles and help that person out.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of definitionally a C. I'm thinking, could we give them a B when we gave the Druid a B?
I mean, I gave the Druid an A.
That's true. So I think I'm going to go with a C for the Ranger.
I'm going with a B.
Okay. I think you're going to be... I think the Ranger really struggles to like, it's incidental. Like, you really struggle to focus your efforts around support.
You know, we're also learning in these videos, if you're watching more than one, that I'm very optimistic about certain classes. There's a lot of classes that I just want to be like, you can do it, buddy. And maybe that's just the way that I am, and that's okay.
I think the Ranger does have some support abilities in their kit, but you know who doesn't? Rogues.
So rogue is actually interesting, and I learned this in previous videos, that sometimes what I want to say the rogue is good at is actually a completely different role.
Yeah.
The rogue feels like, I'm like, no, there's support in there. And as I started trying to name what the support options were on the rogue, I realized that disarming traps is utility.
Yes.
Infiltration is a different role. Scouting ahead is maybe supporting the party, but that's part of the infiltration explorer idea. So as I tried to say what the rogue was really good at, it's not actually bolstering the other players. They're a tool.
There's a weird thing that you could do with a rogue where you can play like a thief rogue that takes the healer feat and can now use their bonus action to use the healer to use a healer's kit on somebody else. But like that's really niche. Right? Like, you really got to go there. And even then, it's not that great. I guess, like, you could do something cute with an Arcane Trickster, maybe with some of the spells that you pick up. And, of course, there's also the Mastermind. These are the exceptions, though, that prove the rule. The Rogue is a D-tier support character.
I agree. The Rogue excels in certain categories, but when we've broken this up into 7 different party roles...
Yeah.
Support is very specific now, and although the rogue will help their party in a lot of ways, they're more that character that you send to perform a specific task, not bolster the party or get them to be better at the situations that they're finding themselves in.
The rogue is the character that wants to be the target of the support, in most cases. There's the old saying of, let's magic up the rogue and send them forward. And that comes from usually that they're a great vehicle for a lot of buffs because they have high expertise. They have sneak attack. So rogues love having advantage because they get sneak attack when they have advantage on their attack rolls. And when they have advantage combined with their expertise, they excel. They love being the target.
But that I think is actually it. If you pair something like a bard and a rogue.
Yes. Oh.
It's outstanding. The rogue makes a perfect pairing with your support character.
Yes.
As we come to the last 3 primary spellcasters of D&D, starting with the Sorcerer, I think that their rankings entirely depends on the access that they have to spells.
I think the Sorcerer is just like, hey, Cleric, I see what you're doing there. Can I copy your homework and be a Divine Soul? And then you're going to really give the Cleric a run for their money because when you add meta magic to Cleric spells, you go, whoa, now, this is something.
That's one subclass.
Yes.
I will say, other than the Divine Soul, Sorcerers have a pretty decent kit.
Yes.
Not the best. I do think that the ability to add meta magic to something like Haste or Polymorph. Polymorph is a bit of an everything spell, sometimes leaning more into utility. But let's be real, when I use Polymorph, it's usually because my fighter's on the front lines and is down to 10 hit points. Yeah. And so I turn them into a giant ape or something.
And you kind of just healed them in a weird way. And Twin Haste is an amazing buff. Like
Twin Haste, the Ranger and Rogue?
Yeah. Like if there was... I don't think there's any Cleric subclass that gets you Haste. Is there? Has there been one?
I don't know.
I don't think so. Because Clerics... Haste is the spell that Clerics wish they could have. It's the one thing on their kit that would just be like, ugh. And when you can play a Divine Soul that has Haste and all the other Cleric goodies, it's just awesome.
Now, here's what I think is going to pull the Sorcerer back a bit.
Yeah.
They do have a limited amount of spells. We've seen the Aberrant Mind and the Clockwork Soul add additional spell options here. But most of the time, you're not going to be focusing on building a support kit. You might have a few, and your meta magic is going to help with that. As a Shadow Sorcerer, I did lean into trying to be a support player, but that's my secondary option.
Yeah, and when I played a Clockwork Soul, I found very much the same way. It was that battlefield control and utility were my primary things, but I could throw down a couple well-timed buffs.
I think a B is a safe place to put the Sorcerer, because you could decide, I'm going to build my whole spell list on support spells, and you'd be good at it because of the meta magics you choose and some of the cool Sorcerer options that we have.
You know why we call it you know why it's the B ranking? Because the B ranking is all about the build.
When we talk about the options that you do have for selecting spells and casting spells, when we come to the Warlock, I'm going to dial it back even further. Because although there are some good Warlock options to pick some support spells, to be able to buff your party and help them out in situations, the fact is that I rarely am going to be casting a spell that isn't a very specific game-changing moment on the battlefield, which actually usually is either going to be utility or damage.
Or battlefield control.
Which is utility.
Exactly, right? You could play a very interesting Celestial Warlock that had some healing abilities, and I think the Celestial Warlock, once again, here's the exception that proves the rule, is actually a really good subclass. I just don't think that overall, the Warlock, and when we look across the other Warlock subclasses, it's just not in their kit. You could do it. Like, the spells are there that you could build a really cool support-based Warlock, especially once you throw in the invocations and start playing around with some other supporty type things that are hiding there in the invocations list. I think you're still going to end up with a character that that is still straddling the same sort of lines that the Bard is straddling, or the Druid is straddling, but then also only has 2 spell slots.
And this is why, do I think that they're the worst in the game at support? No, not at all. I think they're a solid C.
Yes.
There are build options here, but the Warlock is not your go-to support kit.
Yeah, I think, and in that respect, I gotta say, like, giving the Warlock a C really throws into sharp relief, like, some of the earlier rankings that we gave. Like, if we're gonna get, like, for me, if the Warlock's a C, the Ranger is absolutely a C as well. Like, I actually feel that it's actually not too far apart, though, between those two. Like, I feel like a Ranger could potentially offer just as much support to the party as a Warlock.
Are you still trying to convince me to lower my Ranger score?
Yeah, kinda.
I'm sticking with B.
Okay.
But as we move to the Wizard, this is another place where I think we know what your favorite class in the game is, and we disagreed a little bit on this one.
I have to be honest. The Wizard is good at support, but they don't have a single real healing spell on their list. And that's a big knock against them. And I don't think there's many ways for them to change that. There's weird necromancy spells that let them heal in a pinch, but that's not going to be something that you can rely on. They do have a lot of great buff spells, and they can buff the party up in a lot of ways. But the Wizard is also one of those places where, once again, you draw the line. If you have cast Rary's Telepathic Bond on your party and Water Breathing on your party, you just brought utility. You didn't bring support, because we're looking for kind of those more numerical bonuses with support. But nevertheless, I think that there's still a lot there to go on with the Wizard, and I still want to give them an A, because I think that they're still better at it than a Ranger.
Oh, now we can actually talk about whether my Ranger ranking was too good, because I gave the Ranger a B, and I gave the Wizard a B.
Yeah.
And the Wizard and Ranger are not equal.
No. One of these things is not like the other.
Fair. Maybe my Ranger ranking is going to change then to a C, in light of the fact that if we were to compare these two, the Wizard has a full kit of spells. They have the most access to spells. They don't get healing. But when we talk about the broader scope of support, the Wizard has every other broad stroke idea of support in their kit.
On the flip side, though, I am thinking about this now too, and I'm like, how can I give the Druid a B and the Wizard an A when it comes to support, when the Druid has healing spells and the Wizard doesn't?
So maybe we just stick to our guns and go with our guts. There are several options here for support characters. And I think it's not necessarily about saying, oh, the Wizard is better than this person, therefore they can't be the same rank.
But it's who has the most options. Like, who has the options? What class is going to offer you lots of choices, lots of build options, lots of effective ways to do this? And I think that Druids and Wizards, you could do it. And I think that the level that the Druids and Wizards, the options that Druids and Wizards have for building themselves as support characters is pretty high.
Okay, as a final note to end this off,
yeah,
if you had to pick if you had to pick 3 classes to be your gung-ho support trio, who would you pick?
Bard, Paladin, Cleric.
I think I would do... So I'm torn between Bard, Cleric, Druid, or Bard, Cleric, Artificer.
In our games that we played with Chris and Colby, one of the questions there for those character optimization games was always, who's playing the Paladin?
Right. And I think that as we wrap this up, let's take a look at both of our scorecards. A few differences, a few
changes
along
the way.
But it's tough to rank every class in this way, and I think that again, this is just a thought experiment, and it's us riffing on some classes perform better, others don't.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot of fun to take a look at these. As we look at what our community thought of the support role, I think that despite the fact that you and I were very back and forth, the community definitely was in favor of some of our top choices here. So up on screen right now, you're going to see the community rankings, and obviously the Cleric was the top choice with 54.2%. Meanwhile, the Bard comes in a very close second. Now, mind you, we asked...
Comes in a distant second.
It comes in second with 32.3%. But I do want to say here that, again, the question isn't who's better than what. It's who do you think the best is? So 32% of people did think the Bard was the best, which is saying a lot.
But the Cleric is a solid majority. However, we do see some notable support for some of the other classes that we ranked quite highly here. And I think it's worth looking at those to consider people observing, yeah, this is really good. This offers something. The Druid got 5.8% of the vote. The Druid there was ahead of the Wizard, the Artificer, and the Paladin. I am shocked, though, that the Paladin only got 1%.
I personally think that the Paladin doesn't offer as much as the Artificer, Druid, and Wizard. It offers a consistent amount of support, and it is a support helper.
I don't know, man. The words ring out into my mind. Who's going to play the Paladin?
Yeah, but that's also because the Paladin is a dash of support, a dash of utility, an incredible frontliner, an incredible beatdown. And I mean, the reason why the question is who's going to play the Paladin is because they're A or S in 4 to 5 of the 7 party roles.
This is true, yeah.
So that question isn't about because they're the best support. It's because they have a dash of support that they consistently put out, while being S tier in other categories.
Well said. I agree.
So this has been a look at the best support character in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. If you have differing opinions or want to sound off on who your favorite support classes are in the comments below, go to the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. Their monthly support helps us do what we do here on YouTube, and we have an amazing community of our Patreon supporters on Discord. So if you follow the links below, you can get onto our Patreon and chat with us on Discord.
And if you want to see me fail miserably at attempting to be a support role in Dungeons & Dragons, you can check out our live play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
If you like tier ranking videos, and you probably do because you're watching videos on YouTube, check out all of our other rankings right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.